Coin traders, how we doing? What's going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Celestia TIA on that ticker. Wanted to cover it because we had a very nice break in structure here, especially after an otherwise longer term downtrend. So right now, a lot of things that we're actually looking at right now to actually reverse and change this trend. So a lot of good things flipping into the bullish signs for the Celestia investors here. So a lot of great things coming out for the bulls here. Now, I guess to start off, wanted to zoom in kind of here and talk about the candle that just closed. Very nice candle, especially with a nice lower shadow, not much upper wick, so a lot of buying power, not much pressure for selling. Obviously, in the current candle, we're probably going to get a little bit of that since we have had a lot of upside here. So now need time for a little bit of retracement, but nice to get a nice bullish cross here on the 12 period and 26 period EMA. And so especially after 4 days of nice upside with follow through, very nice volume and a lot of upside and follow through there as well. Exactly what we want to see, especially having a nice candle close on top of 50 period EMA. So from the level of the 50 period EMA, closed about 12% on top of the 50 period EMA, which is a very good sign because typically if we barely broke it, for example, the risk of actually retracing and losing that level does start to increase. So now the likelihood, because we have actually broken so far bullish on top of 50, does mean that it does increase the likelihood of establishing this 50 as that very nice point of resistance instead of losing it and reestablishing it as that resistance point once again. So if we actually zoom out here, you can see that the exponential moving averages have been very bearish ever since we have reversed the trend here after putting in our high back in the start of February. So losing it, lower high, lower high, lower high, you get the picture. And anyway, so now you can see that we had been stuck up at resistance in between this exponential moving average zone for quite some time now. So very nice to see prices getting on top of this. And that's why we actually do like looking at a nice bullish cross here on 12 and 26. So next we will likely find the 12 running up to the 50, and then finally the very last setup for a nice bullish indicator and pretty much reversing and completely getting back into a bullish setup would be 26 on top of 50. So probably not going to happen for a little bit of time now. But anyway, that's pretty much what we are looking for in terms of exponentials. And pretty much what we do expect right now is to backtest those and find them as support, especially since it has been resistance this whole way down. So path of least resistance, hopefully now, should very much be to the upside. So hopefully, especially with a lot of nice upside move, and this extremely nice bullish volume bar coming in, hopefully to find a lot more upside pressure, especially topping out some of these previous trend highs. So now looking at reversing that as well. So already set our low, high, higher low, now definitely a higher high. So starting to favor back more upside, especially after breaking through a lot of these levels. And right now, pulling up technicals, you can see that we are looking at starting to rally up. But what's actually significant, and let's actually look at RSI here, a relative strength index, is that we're actually finding support on top of this moving average. So typically we do find a lot of upside momentum as well. So even if we do end up pulling back, hopefully we do stay on top of this exponential moving average. As you can see, typically what we find in a lot of good, strong setups, and this is still a very new chart, so you can't really see it too much, but interestingly enough, we know that a lot of divergence happened here. So pulling back the RSI to actually reset it to have it provide a lot more of the upside momentum is a very good sign here. So a lot of good things to be looking at in terms of the technicals and pretty much about what you'd be expecting right now in terms of where the setup is currently. Now, flipping over here into the 2-day chart, I want to talk about this double bottom that we did establish. And essentially, there's a very nice support line for the close that we are looking at 879. So very nice level that has been tested this whole time on this pullback. And then even looking left right off the launch, very nice point of support as well. So very relevant line of support for this price here. And then up ahead, we're actually going to have several points for resistance here. Coming up, we're going to be specifically looking overhead at the top, but also we are going to be looking at 1182, followed by about 1215 here. So right now, as you can see, working on this 2-day candle right now, still about a full day left before it actually does print and close. And so right now, getting a little bit more of that sell-off pressure, especially in this sell zone here with resistance up overhead. And so right now, looking at 50 period EMA on this 2-day chart as resistance as well. But like you can see, we have been finding resistance in between the 12 and 26. So the fact that now we are well above this 26, looking to actually hold a close in between the 26 and 50, even if we can't actually see a close on top of 50, still would be an extremely good sign since we haven't had that since the all-time high and the trend high here for Celestia TIA. Now, pulling up some technical indicators for the 2-day chart as well. Specifically, want to talk about how we actually were overextended here, not quite, barely, but 30.09 was the low that we actually found for the close that came in. So when we were looking at closing support coming in right around 972, actually printed that as the RSI, yet meanwhile set a lower low for the close here. Even though we did have a higher low on the price, still a lower low on the close, especially maintaining it at 879. Yet meanwhile, if we look at the RSI, we're actually looking at the RSI being about 34 down to about 33.8. So a little bit more of that bullish divergence here coming in. So especially now targeting these 50-period EMAs, as well as this resistance zone, we are seeing a little bit more of that upside pressure. And if we actually want to go ahead and look at the MACD, moving average convergence and divergence as well, very nice bullish setup. And we are looking at the MACD getting on top of the signal line and actually starting to spread out in a gap. Histogram bars are starting to increase, so a very good looking MACD as well for a lot of upside momentum. So all things are, for the most part here, pretty good for this setup here, especially if we can continue to see what we have been seeing so far, which is increasing a nice bullish volume and a lot of that follow through. So very nice setup with these two bullish candles, especially breaking through, confirming, backtesting this 12-period EMA as support, rounding above the 26, and despite even getting now rejected and resistance established at the 50-period EMA, still a very good sign, and we do have plenty of time for the bulls to actually knock out this level because we are still very much on top of the 50-period EMA on the daily like we just looked at. So now switching here over to the weekly, and as you can see, still very new chart, so barely starting to print a 26-period EMA, but we are starting to find resistance at that. So we are looking up overhead for exponential moving average resistance on the weekly. So EMA for this weekly on the 12th period is going to be at 11.15.9, whereas we're looking at the 26-period EMA being at 11.861. So plenty of upside resistance, especially based off of that. Looking left, we are going to be looking at another big level of closing resistance coming in at 11.55. So as you can see, big level of closing resistance. Found it as support for the price as well as support on the way to the all-time high. So a very relevant level as well. So this overall zone is going to be pretty big and struggle. So that's why it is so important and imperative that we actually find the bull step up and provide a lot of that volume for follow through here. Otherwise, we will be in risk of pretty much putting in a lower high here and then testing a lower low. So most likely scenario right now, though, is going to be establishing some sort of lower high in some capacity, especially since if we actually go ahead and look at Fibonacci's here, we're looking at from the low to the all-time high, actually breaking below the 61.8% here for retracement on the Fibonacci. But if we actually want to look at the closes, and we go to the close here for the top, then you can see that the price here was maintaining support for the close on top of the 61.8. So a little bit more of a relevant indication here, especially despite a little bit of these shadows dipping down here below that level. Still a very nice setup here, especially since we were looking at pretty much a very stereotypical double bottom pattern type forming playing out here. So it is pretty much going to be a very big, important thing to break above this resistance zone. Otherwise, we will be looking at seeing rejection and probably a little bit of consolidation before likely another retracement and testing some lower lows. So very, very important right now to actually consolidate on the short term, see a little bit more of that follow through, break above this resistance level. Otherwise, like we said, going to be putting the ball back in the bear's court here for a little bit more of the longer or shorter to medium longer term here. So obviously a very new chart. So pulling up technicals, you can see on this weekly, not even too much data for weekly stochastic RSI here. So looking at a nice bullish formation, especially down below the 20 line here on stochastic RSI. So could be looking at a very nice signal for a lot of upside momentum and pressure here based on stochastic RSI. So we're hoping we do see that play out here. But based on what we know about volume, last week we did close at a volume of 5.306 million. Right now we're at 3.711 million with only 2 days in. So about 5 days left to go on this weekly candle. And we are already over halfway to what we saw last week for that volume. So a lot of good signs here, especially if we can keep getting a lot more of that follow through like we talked about. Do want to end up seeing that, but can't get overextended on this candle, but would love to see a very, very nice candle end up printing and closing here, especially as long as we maintain prices on top of this $11 level. Now, I do want to flip over here into the shorter term 4-hour chart here, just because after extremely nice upside moves, especially a little bit more on the vertical side here, and a very nice pump, obviously a lot of great volume like we talked about. Very normal to see a little bit of retracement, but ideally what we'd love to see is either some sideways consolidation to allow these exponential moving averages to catch up, or even potentially a little bit more of a flag type pattern. Previously, resistance, would love to back test those, especially if they do line up with where these exponential moving averages would meet before taking off again. That's one of the better cases for Celestia TIA right now in terms of consolidating and giving the bulls a little bit of a breather. So know that a lot of strong resistance is going to be coming in overhead from the 12 to the 1225 level. So that is kind of one of the reasons why it's actually not a bad thing if we actually take a little bit more time here, establish this level as some longer term support while we consolidate, and then blast through that level once again, because that's really going to be one of the critical levels, like we've talked about, that it is imperative to maintain if we want to see longer term bullish upside directional movement. Otherwise, we will be in risk of actually seeing slippage and farther downside pressure. But overall, it's definitely been very nice to see, especially since we have looked at our all-time high coming in on the beginning and middle of February. So it's been about 110 days now that we're actually looking at to see this kind of movement. So over 3 months of just pulling back and consolidating with the rest of crypto space, and from the all-time high, a lot of downside pressure. So over 63% of a pullback. So that's definitely on the larger side for what we've seen out of a lot of these altcoins in the current market scenarios. So plenty of reasons why we actually want to see a lot more of this upside pressure. So great signs, great news, and a great structure and setup forming here so far. So hopefully we can continue to maintain that and confirm a longer term structured uptrend in favor of the bulls for Celestia. So definitely drop me a note in the comment sections below and let me know your thoughts, whether or not you think we will see continued upside out of Celestia. But otherwise, that will go ahead and wrap up the show for today. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Definitely helps me out so much. And also do appreciate all the continued love and support, both over here and on Twitter. At @coin_trades is the handle over there on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So do appreciate all the continued love and support. It does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, everyone, and catch you back in the next video.